why don't each of you, Gerard, you could start, then Hope, then Julian, just take 1 minute, tell everyone what you've been doing for the last 5 years or 10 years, whatever you like. And then I will start going into questions.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I'll kick it off. I'm sure we can learn a lot from the other panelists, but I guess what the important thing is that I presented on last week was the recent research about sectors, what sectors have caused what global warming until now, and that's been a bone of contention amongst many people, but the IPCC laid out conventions or rules by which we measure and compare greenhouse gases about 3 decades ago. And these rules have remained unquestioned largely and adopted by major efforts such as the Global Carbon Budget and others to assess emissions. Now, there's a lot of distortions in what was believed and understood back then and what we know now. For example, the climate science has changed radically. We have new models which now record, we can compare gases and we can show what warming has occurred because of each gas. But there's three things that my two recent papers highlight, which radically changes our view on what has caused current global warming. The first thing is that up until now, we measure emissions from land clearing and from fossil fuels very differently. There are reasons for that, but when you measure them consistently, when you measure them the same way, see, what happens is when we burn fossil fuels or cut down a forest and burn it, the CO2 that's emitted, 2/3 of it is sunk, is drawn down by vegetation within the first year. Okay, so 2/3 is drawn down. So what affects the atmosphere, what affects the climate is what's left in the atmosphere, which is true. And this is the convention that they've used, just take the net amount. But they've only applied that to land clearing emissions. They haven't applied that to fossil fuel emissions. If you do it consistently and apply either net or gross to both, you find that land clearing since 1750 has emitted more carbon dioxide than fossil fuels. And that is a game changer. That's a really big knock around the head to many, many people on planet Earth. The second thing is that we've used time-dependent metrics to compare the warming from each gas. We've used this thing called global warming potentials with a time frame of 100 years, and that's been accepted, and that's the standard, and that's what's been used to compare many countries, etc., with their emissions. We have new measures now. We have this measure called effective radiative forcing, particularly the newest one, which is emissions-based effective radiative forcing, and it accounts for interactions in the atmosphere, atmospheric chemistry, and downstream gases. And that's a really interesting new metric that it's not a forward projection like a model, it's fitted to past data. So it's the best science we have now to measure warming from each gas. And the third thing is that has been largely ignored is that in burning fossil fuels, we produce a lot of cooling emissions. And these cooling emissions have masked or prevented 3/4 of the warming from fossil fuel warming emissions. So when you add those three things together, you account for land clearing carbon consistently with fossil fuels. You measure, compare warming from each gas using the new effective radiative forcing. And thirdly, when you add in the cooling emissions, you find that the greatest warming has been caused by the agriculture sector. And within that, animal agriculture, almost 90% of that. And fossil fuels have caused 1/3 of what agriculture has caused. That is less than 20% of current global warming. That's not the future. If we clear the skies of aerosols, fossil fuel warming will increase dramatically, which is what they're really worried about now. But that's the current situation. What has caused current global warming we're experiencing? 60% agriculture, 18% fossil fuels. So in a nutshell, that's the work that my last few years of work.
Thank you. Hope?
All right. My name is Hope Bohanec. I'm the Executive Director of Compassionate Living. We're a nonprofit focused on animal ethics and environmental impacts of animal agriculture as part of what we do and what we educate on. Gerard, that was fascinating. I can't wait to hear more about that. Really interesting stuff. For myself, I've been vegan, plant-based for 35 years. And my trajectory has been from radical direct action back in the 90s, where I worked with Earth First up in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm based, locking ourselves to the ancient redwood forests before them to not be cut down. So I did direct action and tree sitting, things like that back in the 90s. My pendulum swung to legislative work through the early 2000s. And now I'm an educator, a vegan educator, and focused on animal ethics and the environmental impact of animal agriculture. I've written 2 books on the subject of humane washing and greenwashing. We're now seeing this kind of shift in the market of animal products, meat, dairy, and eggs, where we're seeing new labels like sustainable and organic and free range and grass-fed and cage-free, and there's so many. And I thought this was very fascinating. I saw this in real time happening through the 2000s and thought that it would be a worthy subject to research deeply. And I did so and have written 2 books on the subject. My first one was 12 years ago, The Ultimate Betrayal, Is There Happy Meat? And then I just came out with an anthology very recently called The Humane Hoax, and it has 18 contributing authors from all different aspects of the issue: animal rescuers, scientists, academics, storytellers, and it's a real collaborative effort that delves into all aspects of humane washing and greenwashing. So that's kind of my expertise around this, and I look forward to the questions.
Julian?
Yeah, I'm Julian Cribb. I'm a science writer. For the last 5 years, I've been particularly focused on trying to save the human race from itself, mainly because I've got grandkids and the world that they're going to inherit will be uninhabitable at the rate that we're going. A number of years ago, I wrote a book. I've written 6 books on the crisis, the Earth emergency, I call it, which is facing humanity as a result of 10 mega threats. So it's not just climate, it's not just global poisoning, it's not just resource scarcity, it's not just food scarcity, it's not just water scarcity, it's not just pandemics, it's not just AI, it's all of these things coming together at the same time, all driven by human overpopulation, overconsumption, and overpollution. Right now, if we want to solve this problem, we have to go back to the things that are driving it. And you know, that's part of what we're going to be discussing today. I've been for 50 years an agricultural writer, so I'm into this issue about how we grow food renewably, as opposed to how we continue the Stone Age technology that we call agriculture.
So let's assume that we made this panel 10,000 hours and you each presented all the data and all the information, and we were 100% convinced that everything you said was great, accurate, and true. Okay, now what? In other words, you've been written books, you've put this information out. A lot of us who are listening are already on your side. We're like, we're interested, but we're 100% bought in. Everything you're saying, we're with you, right with you, 100%. But what do we do? So, I mean, yes, I want to ask you questions, but if in the end of the day, We already have heard a lot of this. We believe it. What do? We live in a world where, to me, the answer is that simple answer is a lot of people make money doing what they do and they don't want to change. So if someone sells cigarettes or someone sells Agent Orange or someone sells high fructose corn syrup, this is how they make a living. They don't want to suffer. So no matter what point you make, no matter how bad it is for everyone and everything, if that's how someone makes a living, they often don't want to change. So for all of us who are watching, what do we do with this information when we're done with the lecture?
Steve, Hope, you go first.
Well, maybe I'll go first because I think mine might be very specific, and your alls might be a little more broad and complex. But as I saw EG put in the chat, go vegan, and I think this is something that is an all-encompassing solution to so much. Where we certainly can't boil everything down to one thing. There is a lot of complexity and in the global crisis that we're having. But if we want to look at it from an individual standpoint, what can we do for in our personal daily lives? Our food choices have one of the most powerful impacts. So reducing and eliminating animal products, really, that's going to be, so much better than driving a hybrid to the store or, whatever. And there's so many choices we can make and important in choices, but food really impacts everything so much. So, so that, just in a nutshell, I'll say that. And maybe, Julian, if you want to get a little more complex with it.
Well, I thought I'd throw a cat among the pigeons by lifting Steve's point about money being the thing that drives all of this stuff that's going on around us. Money doesn't in fact exist at all. It is a figment of the human imagination. Now, if you don't believe me, go and ask your dog. Has it got money? Money does not exist in the real world, but water is real. Forests are real. Grasslands are real. Wildlife is real. The oceans are real, and they are being destroyed by human beings using money. We use money as the mechanism to destroy the things that sustain life on planet Earth. So there is a solution to this. It's called the Earth Standard Currency. I don't want to bore you with it at the moment. I want to come back to what Hope was saying. Yes, we have to change our diet because we are eating the planet. We're eating 40 billion tons of topsoil every year. We are consuming 2/3 of the world's fresh water just to grow our food, right? We are spreading chemicals. 5 million tons of ultra toxic pesticides are used to support our farming systems today. And these are getting into our kids' brains and our mother's milk. Don't take my word for it. There is lots and lots of science out there confirming this. So the system of food production that we've got at the moment is toxic and it is unsustainable. Agriculture destroys the very things it needs to survive. That's food, soil and water, and the living environment. So agriculture is not the solution in the long term. It was a wonderful, don't get me wrong, I love farmers. I've worked with them for 50 years. It was a wonderful solution to feeding the world for the last 7,000 years, but it won't feed 10 billion people on a hot planet. We've got to double food production between here and 2060, and that's just going to wreck the place, especially as we now throw away 40% of the food that we already grow. So that there's colossal waste inherent in this system that we've got. We have to go to renewable food. Now, everyone's heard of renewable energy. Have you heard of renewable food, right? Renewable food is food that is produced without waste, without any form of waste and without any form of environmental destruction, and which is climate proof. Okay, now that's urban food production. That's deep ocean agriculture. And I've written books about these things. The science is there to show that they work. But basically we have to produce food by completely different methods. And Hope is correct. We also have to modify our diet, not only because our current diet is very bad for the environment, it's also very bad for our health. I mean, it is actually chock full of toxins. You think about that that loaf of white bread you've got, the mold doesn't grow on it for a week. If you make bread yourself, the mold appears after 2 days. What is the difference? The commercial bread is chock full of fungicide, which is the most toxic chemical you could possibly think of, because fungi are really tough little critters. So, our modern food supply is inundated with poisons of various kinds, all to suit the industrialized money-making machine that is the modern food production. So we need to get those chemicals out of the system. It's all very well saying eat vegan, but if the vegetables are grown with toxic chemistry, then we really it's not going to do us, our health, any good at all. We have to produce those vegetables with clean hydroponic methods, recycling nutrients and water in the big cities and elsewhere. We have to produce fish in the deep oceans where they interfere with nothing else, and they're not contaminating fjords and lochs and places where we farm fish at the moment. So those kinds of methods, and regenerative farming. There are wonderful regenerative farmers, people like Joel Salatin, an American farmer, all around the world, trying to find the best ways to produce food without destroying the environment and being cruel to animals.
Julian, I love you and I think you're wonderful. So don't take it personally if Gerard and Hope have a lot to say about Joel Salatin and all that. So we love what you're saying, but they might have some other things to say. So Gerard, did you want to comment on my original comment?
Yeah, just a short one, because this discussion will get very interesting, I think. But my approach is perhaps adding to one part of this, and that is, what can happen if we get serious about changing what we eat. And the work I've done recently, not only does it expose the amount of carbon emissions from land clearing, it also exposes the amount of drawdown on managed and intact land. So since 1750, we have drawn down largely in forests and the ocean. We're drawn down thousands of billions of tons of CO2. The amount of carbon in the current world's forests, we've cut down half the world's forests, 3 trillion trees or so. But the forests that remain now contain twice as much carbon as what was there before. So nature is stepping up its act to clean up our excesses. So the work that I've done on gross accounting of carbon emissions exposes the full amount of these excesses. It also exposes the true amount of drawdown. So, and we continue to deforest, of course. In my experience, right, I was working with government, watching trees being bulldozed, and then now, more recently, I've worked with Byron Shire to offset some of their emissions. And we had a program called Replant Byron. Now, this program was to plant 1.8 million trees. Now, 1.8 million trees is what's cleared in 2 days in Australia's deforestation, and that's mostly for red meat. So, planting trees is one thing, but the most effective thing we can do is reduce the demand for those foods that cause deforestation. So the work that I've done shows that there's enormous potential in the forests that are still there, plus the work of Crowther Labs, for example, in Switzerland. They produced a couple of papers that looked at what is the potential. How can we, and the second paper addressed a lot of concerns that were flagged by the first, and they had dozens of authors globally look at land that was out of production, not being used as anything, farming, grazing, built up areas, and potential areas. So a potential, restocking of the carbon of the original forest. And what they found is that there's a lot of forest that is degraded. And if you count most that drawdown potential in degraded forests and degraded land out of production, okay, not affecting agriculture at all, then you could draw down a large chunk of what's in the atmosphere now. And on top of that, if you look at the potential for drawing down extra carbon, that is the world's grazing lands, for example, the parts of planet Earth that give us red meat and some dairy. If you look at those, and it doesn't produce all the red meat because a lot of it comes from feedlots as well. But if you look at those lands, almost half of those lands were originally forest. And forests hold 90% of the above ground carbon. Soil carbon changes, but very slowly. Okay, and when it's eroded by water, for example, and enters streams and the oceans, it's actually almost half of it is buried again. So that soil carbon is just moved; it's not emitted. So that's from water erosion. So, but the thing is, if you add the Crowther Labs unused land and degraded forests potential to the carbon potential of grazing lands, you can immediately take all the excess CO2 out of the atmosphere, and what will be outgassed by the oceans, then you can suck that down as well. So nature has been working flat out, has doubled its carbon storage in the forests. We can take advantage of that by just letting nature do its job. But what's needed there most, what's the big job is to restore the landscapes. And the best people to do that are the people on the land. So farmers are needed, and lots more of them. Indigenous people are needed, and lots more of them. We need huge programs. We need a decent price on carbon to pay for this, but we need huge programs to let the forests regrow. A lot of the forests will come back. Chernobyl showed us that. Forests are itching to come back. In fact, we have these two super tools that we have terraformed planet Earth. The first of them was fire, and we've used that for millennia. The second is grazing animals. Sheep and goats are incredible at snipping off any tree that pokes its head up. So we've used these two terraforming tools. Now, if we can stop using those two terraforming tools, well, for example, there was a study came out about a decade ago looking at sub-Saharan Africa. If sub-Saharan Africa were to stop the burning, and they burn it every year, they burn off the old dead grass, make new green pick, and they kill the ticks at the same time. So it's for the cattle. It's pasture maintenance fires. If we just stop the burning of pasture maintenance fires, half of sub-Saharan Africa would regrow into forest. Now, the thing we need to do most is build fences to keep out the ferals being cattle, sheep, etc. So there's a huge amount of work needed on the land, but we can solve climate change and biodiversity, the two biggest factors. Apart from the pollution, you're dead right there, Julian. There's lots of stuff. What is it? The poly crisis. But this would go a long way towards fixing the biggest problems on planet Earth, climate and biodiversity loss.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so although it would be very good to discuss a lot of things, what I prefer to do is ask for 1 minute answers, no longer, so I could just go into 50 different questions, understanding that it'll be a different type of panel than one where you go into great detail. But for the purposes of just getting through and letting people hear the basic 1 minute version, I'm going to ask for just 1 minute on each question, okay? This will allow us to cover a lot of points. So we'll do that. Okay, so Hope, the term humane hoax is central to your work. Could you define this concept for those who may be hearing it for the first time?
Sure. And I'll just say 1 minute's hard. We'll try, but that's tough. My fellow panelists and I can tell are people that like to unpack things, but we will do our best. Okay, so the humane hoax. Just in a nutshell, the humane hoax is this idea that there is a better way, a more humane way, a more sustainable way to produce animal products. And it's a false hope is what it is. Unfortunately, when I've done extensive research into both the humane aspect and the environmental aspect of this. And, as animal activists, we've done an incredible job, I feel, if I do say so myself, in the last few decades of exposing the cruelties, the just awful nature of animal agriculture, the environmental impact, all of that. And so the industry is responding. The marketing and industry is responding, and they are coming up with clever marketing schemes and beautiful websites and shiny labels that are saying, hey, everything's okay. We're going to do it better. We're going to go grass-fed or cage-free. But when you dig in, when you research it, and I have gone onto these farms myself, actually researching and going and experiencing these farms myself, you learn that unfortunately, that it's all a packaged marketing tool to sell a very unsustainable, cruel product. That where there are inherent cruelties that they just cannot avoid. There's I won't go into the detail, and we maybe will in future questions. But in a nutshell, it's all those labels that we're seeing, the cage-free, free-range organic, and the truth behind those labels. And that's why I wrote my 2 books.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Julian, could you explain further how a human survival index might incorporate data related to the environmental burden of animal agriculture?
Wow, that's a complicated question. But basically, a human survival index is simply a way of scientifically measuring how close to disaster the human species actually is. So you're measuring things like the climate, you're measuring things like the health of the oceans, you're measuring things like the area of forests, you're measuring things like the rate of extinction, and so forth, the amount of pollution, the amount of poison that we're circulating on the planet. You measure all of those, you put it into a scientific index, and it tells you that today we're a bit closer to disaster than we were yesterday or the day before. I'm a communicator. It's my way of letting people know how bad is the hole, or how deep is the hole that humans are digging for themselves. It's like the Dow Jones. We've all been watching the Dow Jones go up and down in the last few days. That's an indicator of stock prices, right? The Human Survival Index is an indicator of human survivability. If this planet goes to 4 degrees, you won't be having any agriculture on it. Absolutely not. If we destroy all the topsoil, and we're destroying 10 kilos with every meal we eat, there won't be any agriculture. We're draining oxygen out of the oceans. We're turning the oceans acidic. There won't be any fish in the sea to be had. So if we allow these things to continue to their natural progression, the world will not be able to support large animals of any form, including humans. And this is not me talking. This is the science. There's a lot of science on this, and you just got to read it to understand it. But the Human Survival Index is a way of letting people know day to day, like the nightly weather report, whether things are getting better or worse under our management. Because we're responsible for managing this planet, and we are mismanaging it really badly at the moment. So it's, livestock overgrazing is one example of how we're mismanaging it. Nuclear weapons is another example of how we're mismanaging it. Carbon emissions is another example of how we're mismanaging it. Poisons, the generation of 200 billion tons of chemistry by human beings every year is what's destroying us and our brains and our health. So all of these things are indicative of a species without a future unless it pulls up quickly.
Thank you. Gerard, you stated that we are in the midst of the sixth great extinction. What evidence strongly links animal agriculture to this biodiversity crisis?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's been studied for quite some time. And the latest work, which is a few years out of date, well, there's two things. World Wildlife Fund, WWF, put out an index and the footprint on planet Earth. And they show that to live, to consume, as we do in the Western world, like Australia and North America, we need 5 planets. Now, you could ask any 5-year-old, is that sustainable? Absolutely not. But it does matter what we eat. That's the biggest thing. If the work done in North America, for example, on land needed for diets showed that the basic American meat-heavy diet needs 10 times more land than a vegan diet. But even so that is totally unsustainable. We don't have the land on planet Earth to sustain us now. We've gone into overspend. We're actually spending more on the credit card than we can repay. So we're going into debt, and it's ecological debt. And if you do that for long enough, you get ecological collapse. It's pretty simple. But the other measure of how far we've pushed nature past any natural point is the biomass of the mammals on planet Earth. If you look at that, this is the mammals. This is from mice up to elephants, and including us. And humans make up about 30% of the biomass on. This is the weight, live weight, on planet Earth. Our animals that we keep for food make up about 60%. So we have this colossus that we've bred, and it's not natural. We breed these things. If we stop breeding, they die out pretty quickly. 1% of the biomass on planet Earth is our pets, and 4%, just 4%, is the wildlife. This, elephants, giraffes, zebras, hippos, kangaroos, you name it, 4%. So we've wiped out nearly 3/4 of the populations of wild animals on planet Earth. So we've done a very effective job at stuffing up the wildlife and just as David Attenborough says, we've overrun planet Earth. And we're way past sustainability by any measure. So we've got a big problem there, and the most effective thing that we can do is change what we eat.
Thank you. Hope, there's a very articulate brother and sister, Kaylee and Cassie Means, speaking out about the food system and making some great points about the chemicals, and they're doing a great job. But in their communication, they mentioned that you can't, something to the effect that it's very good to have grass-fed beef. You've highlighted the concept of greenwashing in animal agriculture. What does this term mean, and how is it used to mislead consumers?
Sure. Well, just continuing on what Gerard just talked about, land use is such a great thing to bring into the discussion of free-ranging, grass-fed, all these things that are being presented as solutions, right? I mean, so we now know that, animal agriculture is impactful on the environment. It's so interesting to see the trajectory. I mean, I've been vegan for 35 years, and we used to never see it in mainstream media, in journal, nothing about animal agriculture's impact. If you saw anything about climate change, it never had food involved in the solutions or anything about it. That has changed you now see, that at least I do. I've seen, you'll see something like in Time magazine or some, mainstream information where they acknowledge that, yes, maybe red beef or, red meat, beef has impact. You'll see a little bit, right? But and this is great progress. I'm glad that they're acknowledging it. But interestingly, so what is the industry saying? Well, the industry is not saying no, eat more vegetables. That's the thing to do. They're saying no. We can do it better, right? We can do grass fed. We can do free range. There's so many ways, sustainable, regenerative. Well, the problem with all of these, almost all of these have the same kind of transition or change going on, and that is a smaller number of animals on much larger areas of land, right? So you are using more land, you're destroying more trees and green spaces. You're filling in wetlands. You're expanding prairie lands, for grazing more animals. We know what has caused all the topsoil erosion and problems and deforestation across the US, across Australia. What is it? Grazing, right? Grazing ruminant animals. We know that. So what are they proposing as the solution? More grazing. This makes no sense, right? It makes no sense. It's very frustrating. And I'll give an example. In Petaluma, California, this is in Sonoma County, California, where a lot of this, these labels, you'll see these sustainable labels and grass-fed and all of this. So there is a beef and pork farm in Petaluma. And they, if you go to their website, they've got just acres of land and it's beautiful and green and all of this, right? So they claim that they give their animals 10 acres per cow and 50 acres per every 10 pigs, okay? We are now up to 60 acres for 11 animals. 11 animals. There's 60,000 people in Petaluma alone. How on earth could they feed everyone with this kind of farming? It cannot be scaled up. There's no way. Free ranging, grass fed, all these things can really only be specialty markets for a few elite buyers. There's no way we could feed the 8 billion people on the planet with this kind of farming. So it's really just greenwashing. It may work for a small number of product, but you cannot feed everyone this way. It just can't be done.
Thank you. Julian, considering the interconnectedness of climate change, biodiversity loss, and animal agriculture, what is the single most impactful action individuals in developed nations can take to address these issues?
Eat wisely. In simple fact, understand where your food comes from and how it is produced. Understand if it's produced by chemicalized, cruel, intensive, money-making methods, or understand how it can be produced sustainably. This is at the core of renewable food. So the bottom line advice is eat renewable food. Now, if you look at your teeth, right, those are not the teeth of a vegetarian. They're not the teeth of a sheep. They are the teeth of a mixed feeder, part carnivore, part vegetarian. That's how we evolved over the last couple of million years. So persuading everybody on the planet to go vegetarian, especially persuading Americans, Australians, Argentinians not to eat meat, is going to be a bloody big ask, if you ask me. However, we can produce meat without involving livestock. We can do that now. And it requires very little water and almost no land to do it. So the new meat systems, synthetic meat, it's called, it's getting bad mouthed by the cattle industry and so on, but it's coming, and it's going to go into the sausages and pies and nuggets and things like that. And you don't know what's in a sausage, you don't know what's in a nugget, you don't know what's in a meat pie. You will not know the difference. The consumer will not know that they are not eating cow. But
do you mean cell-based meat? I'm sorry, Julian. Are you talking about like cell-based, or what meat are you talking about?
Talking about cellular culture of meat.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
The first hamburger grown by these methods cost $300,000 because it was a piece of research. But the price of cellular-based meat is now down to $30 a kilo, and it'll be down to $3 a kilo within the decade. So this kind of meat will be available on world markets, whether or not the cattle industry likes it, in the same way that synthetic fibers now clothe everybody, in spite of the fact that the wool and cotton industries didn't like them. So there is a huge change coming in diet. But look, it's not just cellular meat, it's cellular plants. And we currently eat 300 different plants. Okay, worldwide, that's the number of different plants we eat, plant foods. There are 30,000 edible plants on planet Earth. We are eating 1% of all the available vegetable richness of this planet. We haven't even begun to explore the Earth in terms of the wonderful vegetable foods that are available to be eaten. And once we do, once the chefs, the TV chefs get onto this, you're going to see an explosion of interest in new vegetable foods. Take it from me. And a lot of them will be produced in cities by hydroponic methods and so forth. So it's going to be a much more exciting food era and less dominated by these big industrial combines than what we've seen so far.
Julian, again, I love everything you speak about. Just one little subtlety that that to bring up. What Gerard seems to be saying, and Hope also, is that even the people that claim that they do the most, not the cell-based, but with real cows, the people like Joe Salatin who claim they do the most pure, humane, regenerative methods, that actually it still is incredibly resource intensive and is not a solution. Is that something that you're comfortable with, or did you come to a different conclusion than that?
The conclusion I come to after studying agriculture and food for half a century is that you can't wave a magic wand and cause consumers to change their diets. You can't wave a magic wand and cause them to change their energy consumption. Electric vehicles, for example. It takes time for anything to catch on. Let me just respond to Hope on the issue of greenwashing. The fact that there are free-range eggs in the supermarket is due to consumer pressure entirely. Farmers would never have gone away from caged chickens if consumers have not said it's cruel and I'm going to refuse to eat your cruel chicken meat or your cruel chicken eggs. So at least the farmers have adjusted in response to consumers. We do need consumers to start pushing the food corporations and the food chain in the direction of sustainability. If that doesn't happen, they'll just sit there and make money out of both the farmers and the consumers. So they have to be, so some of this greenwashing is actually part of a gradual process of change as agriculture adapts to a new world in which it's not very sustainable, and it's terribly climate vulnerable. So yes, we know it's got to change, but it's not going to change overnight. You have to change people's consumption habits, and that is a very big ask. I mean, not the whole world. The whole world doesn't have exposure to American media, thank heavens. We're not getting the same marketing messages that they're getting in America or in Britain or anywhere else. So you can't change. I mean, Chinese have only just discovered meat. Back in the 1930s, China was a totally vegetarian country. And it's discovered meat, and hence they have the world's biggest pig population and the world's biggest chook population. So China, you try talking the Chinese middle class out of eating meat. They're not going to do it overnight. You might persuade them over a generation, but it's not going to be instant. It's not going to be quick. The crash that humanity is facing is going to come within 30, 40 years. Basically, all of these things are coming together. All of the mega threats the 10 mega threats, of which climate is only one, are coming together in the next 40 to 50 years. So unless we start actively changing all of these things, how we use water, what sorts of food we eat, stop using so much chemicals, stop using so much fossil fuels. So we've got to change all of those things, and that means changing our buying patterns, because the only person in the world that corporations listen to is the consumer. They don't give a rat's backside about governments.
Okay,
that
let Hope respond to it.
Oh, I was just going to say that, Julian, I agree with you. And I say it in my talks and in my books that this, even though I am, frustrated with and speaking out against all these labels, I think they're a good thing. Like, I think that we're moving in the right direction. I think that it is a response that the industry is forced to do because of consumer demand, and that is a good thing. So I agree that these, I think it's something we have to go through to get to the other side, to get to where we want to be, which to me is no animal exploitation at all, and a completely sustainable food system. So yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, and I'll just say, as far as and I also agree with you that it is very important for individuals to make those choices with our dollars when we're at the store, to express what we want to eat. One thing I will just say, and I guess I'll say that I feel like too we need to change who we are as people, not necessarily just what we do, just our habits. Oh, buy this instead of that. I truly feel that we need to change. What are our values? What do we value? What is important to us? And of course, this is a big discussion, but I think that um, being compassionate, being kind, not exploiting animals in any way, and not hurting or killing animals in any way is part of that to me. I think that that is kind of a core foundational compassion that we need to be able to make these changes. Because if we just change our habits from this to that, we can slip back into some other bad habit so easily. We need like fundamental consciousness, societal change, I feel. Anyway, it's a
Okay.
big picture thing. So
Let me move on to Gerard. Gerard, you mentioned that 80% of agricultural land is devoted to livestock and feed. Can you contextualize this figure in terms of the land required for human food production?
Yes. Land use it sounds boring, but it's actually really, really interesting. Where we live, where most people in the world live, is in the cities, the built-up areas. And if you add together the built-up areas, transport, mining, that comes to less than 1% of the world's land, rights-free land. So what happens out there, out behind, out in the bush, as we call it in Australia, is almost hidden to most people. But we were watching like 10 square kilometres of trees in Queensland, 10 square kilometres of trees cut down a day, actually 11. That's 2,500 acres cleared, destroyed, burned per day. 93% of that over decades was for red meat production, basically, some sheep. But the land use, what's really interesting, IPCC put out a report a few years ago, looked at land use and flows of energy, etc. And they found that of the crops, of the biomass of crops that are produced on planet Earth, half of them, sorry, 2/3 of the biomass goes to feeding animals. Of the rest, half of that or a little more goes to feeding humans, and some goes to fuel and biofuels. Fiber and biofuels. So the roughly 4% of the planet that feeds humans gives us about 85% of our calories. So already planet Earth is mostly sustained by just a small percentage of the land. But we have this 40-something percent of the land that is devoted to animal agriculture. that provides us the rest. Some of it is seafood, but most of it comes off the other land. And if you look at totally grass-fed production, that's less than 1%. The Oxford report, Grazed and Confused, discovered that. So really, we are being extremely wasteful in the way we use planet Earth. But no, people don't see that. They see the cities where they live, they see the TV, they think that protein only comes from meat, they think that calcium only comes from dairy foods. They're just hoodwinked. And so what we need to do is change that. But as you said, Julian, that the corporations aren't sort of the baddies in the picture. They're just responding to people, to their demand. But they're also influencing that demand by the incessant ads we get for KFC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think that, top down, bottom up, the only thing that will change is when we change. And what you said, Hope, we are changing. I look at my 6 grandkids and I see there's wisdom there beyond their years. And if they're fully explained the impact of what they're doing, they'll change quicker than we ever did. I ever did at that age. So I'm positive about the future. I see a bright future for humanity, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. Hope, when someone comes up to you and says, Hope, I completely agree with everything you're saying, and that's why I never eat red meat. Our diet is strictly fish, eggs, milk, but we literally never have beef or chicken. We're literally just fish, eggs, and milk. So we're totally with you. How are they doing? What do you say to them in terms of how they're doing in terms of being, being conscious?
Well, I would probably ask if they were concerned for the environment or if they were concerned for animals, because unfortunately, dairy and eggs and fish are incredibly impactful still on the environment, and still are, animals are suffering in those industries. It is interesting. A lot of people, I have heard before people saying, oh, well, I agree. I want to eat more ecological, so I eat chicken. Thinking that it's better than beef, right? There's all these comparisons that can go on, right? Well, beef has a little more climate change impact than chicken, and these little comparisons that can be made. Well, chicken has more water use than beef in a lot of instances, so there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of different impacts, but the best comparison to make, what you really should be asking, is let's compare an animal product to a plant product. That's the comparison that needs to be made. Because anytime you look at life cycle assessments where they analyze the food from, the planting to product, or in animal products instance from, birth to death, that again and again and again, you find that plant foods have much less impact than animal foods across the board. Some people will tell me, oh, well, I eat locally. I eat all local foods. I'm very local oriented, and that can be really good. And I don't mean to say that, supporting your local economy is a bad thing. But, for instance, if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at a banana and you think, oh, well, that's tropical. That had to come so far away. It came across a boat. Maybe I'll eat this local yogurt product, right? Organic yogurt. Well, if you do a life cycle assessment on both of those products, again and again and again, you're going to find that whatever the plant food is, it's less in greenhouse gases, it's less in its resource intensity. When they do these life cycle assessments, like for local products, the how local the food is about 11% of the equation of the impact of a plant, of an animal, or a food, any food, animal or plant food. 11% is kind of how local the food is, but 87%, 83% is how impactful it is with resources. It's resource intensive, right? And animal products are incredibly resource intensive. So trying not to get into too much detail, you're going to be better off with the plant food, no matter what you choose. Local, organic, you find it again and again with all these labels that make a consumer feel like, oh, well, this is the better choice, right? Not necessarily. It's very resource intensive.
Thank you. Julian, assume that someone has never read your books, never heard you speak, doesn't know anything about what you're saying, and you have 3 minutes to communicate to that person. That's as much as they'll watch in a video of everything that you're concerned about and what the problem is and what the solution is. What would you say if you had 3 minutes to sum up every bit of what the problem is and what your solution is?
Steve, I want to start by paying a huge compliment to you, because you are part of the most important evolution that humans have ever been through. And that is sharing knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and ideas globally, online, at the speed of light. Basically, this is the most important thing that humans have ever done. We've stopped being tribal citizens and we've become Earth citizens. And we're not going to fix any of our problems unless we solve them together. We're not going to fix any problems as Americans or Russians or Chinese or Indians or Australians. We're only going to fix them as one people on one Earth. And you are doing your bit, especially in the health space, to achieve that. So good on you.
Thank you.
Hope, I want to praise you for saying, yes, we've got to change. And let me offer a way that we can change. Let us put women in charge of the world, right? Let us put women in charge of government. Why? Because governments that have men in charge invariably end up fighting wars. Women don't start wars, men do, right? Men like to fix things quickly with chemicals and machines, and they end up killing somebody down the track, and they don't care. Women think about what's going to happen to the grandkids. They take a much longer range view of things. I'm not saying that women are perfect, mark you. They do squabble over things, and just like men, but they take a more conservative, long-range, survival-oriented view. And if we had women in charge of government, religion, business, and almost all of our social structures, we would have a much more peaceful and sustainable world, because they would be thinking about the future. The men are just concerned with making as much money as we can and riding headlong into whatever crisis that comes along next. Okay, so please put women in charge. How to sum up the crisis that is facing the human emergency? There are 10 mega threats. They all have solutions. The solutions are documented in my book, How to Fix a Broken Planet, and 5 other books before that. They're not hard to implement. The advice on what you can do in your own life is in that book. I can't encapsulate it in 3 minutes, but there's about 300 things you can do in your own life to save the lives of your grandchildren.
Thank you. Gerard, same question. If someone had never met you, doesn't know your work, and you have 3 minutes to tell them everything that's important, that you want to communicate, the most urgent information and the science behind it and the solutions, what would you go ahead? What would you say?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I underline Julian's comments. This is great work that you are doing. And the interesting thing is that the solutions are out there, as Julian said. What my work does to add to that is to revalue trees. It revalues the carbon value and the biodiversity value. No, not so much the biodiversity, but the climate value of trees. And the only way to get trees restored in a big way at large scale is through changing land use. And the only way to change land use is to change, well, what we eat. Our food occupies 40 times what our cities do. So that's a big lever to pull. And if by pulling that lever, we can change the long term, that is, we can make carbon dioxide a short-term emission, and we can also change the thing that will affect the heating on the planet in the next decades, which is methane production, which is a major thing. And we can also change biodiversity. If we give a large chunk, almost 40% of the planet, the grazing land, back to nature, that will go a long way towards fixing wildlife populations and the biodiversity crisis.
Thank you.
Can I just say something real quick, Stephen? I think it's really interesting that we have, Julian has some really wonderful technological solutions, and Gerard has the nature-based solution of rewilding and regrowing. I mean, we have the solutions here. If people could just, make the changes, it's beautiful to see. It's very interesting the dichotomy of the two kind of trajectories of solutions, but we have them here. It's amazing. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Hope, also for you, what would you like to say?
Oh, what was the question again?
If someone doesn't know your work and you had 3 minutes to explain what the problem is and what your research shows and what the solution is, what would you say to them?
Well, for myself, I think going vegan, live vegan. I think that's the really the easiest thing that someone can do immediately, without they don't have to have extra money. They don't have to have money to buy solar panels. They don't have to, have to go digging to find anything new, really. It's all right there in your supermarket. So it's kind of the easiest solution that has the largest impact is living vegan.
So assume that someone reads your books, reads your research, reads Gerard's latest papers. Again, we come back to the same problem that whoever is selling something doesn't want sales to slow down. So how do we make progress if we all agree that terrible things are happening, but the way to change it is that we got to stop eating eggs? Well, the people who sell eggs don't want that solution. And if the solution is we should stop using pesticides, well, the guy who sells pesticides doesn't like that solution. And the people who own stock in that company and the people who do the marketing and everyone around that industry fights back viciously. So how do we ever solve anything when we might see a problem, but the person who's solving, to solve it, we might lose money. And that guy, the guy who sells the chainsaws to cut down the trees wants to keep cutting down trees because he sells chainsaws. So how do you get around the core problem that someone loses money even if the change is good for the world?
If I could offer a thought there, and it's not a comfortable thought, there is going to be a collapse. We've currently got 4 times more people on the planet than it can sustain in the long term. The sustainable population at current levels of consumption is about 2 billion. And women are getting the population down because they're reducing their fertility levels, but probably not fast enough. So there is going to be a crash. There's probably going to be, before there comes a crash of resources, there's going to be an economic crash. So people who make money are going to find that their money is more or less worthless. So the economic crash will precede it. Now, I can't predict when that's going to happen. It could be within 10 years. It could be within 50 years. But the resources are going to give out. The climate pressure is going to become too great. The toxins are spreading so widely. Nuclear wars will probably break out because we've got the weapons to do it, and some fool will use them sooner or later. So those things are likely to precipitate a disastrous crash in the human population. Science says that if we continue business as usual, then 9 out of 10 humans are going to die. However, what we have here, by doing the changes that Gerard and Hope are talking about and other changes, we can actually mitigate that crash. We can reduce the death toll. We can reduce the loss of humanity by living a much more sustainable life and managing our population down to a sustainable level. To get sustainable, by the way, all we have to do is offer every woman on earth family planning. That's all we have to do. Women will do the rest. They're already doing it. So we will get the population down one way or the other. We have a choice between a natural driven crash and a managed crash. Those are the only choices we've got, because the earth just can't carry this many people for so much longer using the resources at the rate we're using them. So it is going to happen. Now, I'm sorry to say that's not delightfully optimistic, but I'm not in the business of fooling people or being a Hollywood sort of promoter and telling them what they want to hear. I'm in the business of telling them what the science is telling me.
Right.
And that's what the science is saying.
Julian, how do we stay in touch with you if we want to stay involved with your work, your books? What's the best way to, do you have a website? How could people stay in touch with you and learn more?
Yeah, through my website. I can't even remember the web address at this stage, but also the Council for the Human Future, where we are working hard on spreading awareness of the issues and of the solutions. The Council for the Human Future has got some useful advice in there. Join us, because we are about joining hands with everybody who wants a habitable Earth for our grandchildren.
And Hope, how would we stay in touch with you and get your books and learn more?
My books are available anywhere that you buy books. My nonprofit is Compassionate Living. Oh, that's my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast. I have some really wonderful episodes on regenerative animal farming and environmental impact. There's a drop-down menu with categorized episodes. Yeah, we go to episodes, and you can go to environmental, the environment one. And yeah, and that's got some great podcasts that are specific to what we're talking about today. Yeah, and I also have a project called The Humane Hoax, humanehoax.org, if you want to check it out.
Great, thank you very much. And Gerard, how would we stay in touch with you and your work and your projects?
Yes, well, at the moment, it's through the World Preservation Foundation. Where you can look for their website. Also, we had a large contribution to the documentary Eating Our Way to Extinction, and that's available for free on YouTube. And there are websites and the Eating Our Way to Extinction and Eating for the Future. And you can look at those websites, and there are contacts there. So yeah, if they want to know more, Eating Our Way to Extinction is a good way to get to us.
And what about, how old is this most recent paper you did? How new is it, and how do people see it?
Yes, okay. The two papers that we produced recently were both published in one of the top journals, called Environmental Research Letters, and one in October and one last month. And we are busy promoting those right now. But what I'll do is I'll put the links to each of those in the chat if anyone's interested in that right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'll also put my email.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for sharing this. It's not enough time to discuss everything, but thank you so much for being willing to share this. And we look forward to continuing to work with you and hear your information. If we could unmute everyone so everyone could thank them as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful,
Thank you so much.
wonderful.
Working, Andy.
Very interesting.